evening, I'm Marty Olson, and welcome to another edition of City Focus. Tonight I'm pleased to have as my guest a New London businessman, and as he likes to call himself, redeveloper, Frank McLaughlin. And Frank has been a very active guy in town, and not only has he invested in New London, but he's really got plugged in a variety of boards, agencies, business organizations, and his presence is seen and felt throughout the community, not just the business community. And Frank, I want to welcome you to the program.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I've had Frank on once before. I don't know, a year, 2 years ago, but we had a nice conversation. At that time, I think it was primarily geared around the New London Development Corporation.
The
Perhaps
what?
We may want to tap into that over the course of tonight. But in recent weeks, I've been trying to have a business theme for the program, and I've invited folks in who are in business and have invested in New London, and try to get a feel for why they have done what they're doing and how it's working out for them. Why are they here? What's working, but perhaps what's not working, and what can we do to make our community a better place? And I'd just like to note, as part of the intro with Frank, he's spent 3 years in the Army as a broadcast specialist in Korea, and with the Special Forces at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and he worked for CBS in Philadelphia as a radio talk show producer and flying traffic reporter. Flying traffic reporter?
It was almost before the days of helicopters. We actually flew our traffic reports from an airplane at Twin Beach Bonanza. And it was in the Philadelphia area. And on the weekends, we covered the traffic from the Jersey Shore back to Philadelphia, because that was always a big, massive traffic jam. It was a lot of fun.
Now, were you flying or were you just reporting?
No, I was reporting.
That sounds pretty neat. I made a career change and got involved in real estate marketing in particular, and redevelopment as a district court mediator and chairman of the board of a community bank. His avenue of service locally has been, actually not just locally, but throughout your adult life, has been through the Rotary Club.
Yep, 35 years.
And I applaud that as a member of Kiwanis. I think it's important through these service organizations. It's a good venue to give back.
It's a great way to do it, yeah.
And I really admire the work of Rotary, and I had on a few weeks ago Barry Levinson and Ed Kramer representing the Rotary. Nice conversation.
Great, yeah. They are two great Rotarians, there's no doubt about it. And
over the course of Frank's Rotary career, he has helped to form a second Rotary Club on St. Thomas 35 years ago. And when he was president, raised over $100,000 via condo raffle for their fledgling foundation, which today is valued at well over $500,000. So that's pretty significant. Currently, he's chairman of the Economic Development Commission and project manager for the Renaissance City Development Association. A few other areas I'd just like to check off that Frank's involved with locally as we speak. He's a board member of Sector. He's a trustee of the Chamber of Commerce, secretary for Opsail Schoonerfest, which we just held this last weekend, commissioner for the City Center District, founder of the McLaughlin Companies LLC, project manager for RCDA and the NCGMA, and again, chairman of the Economic Development Commission. So needless to say, you've got involvement in a variety of areas, and I think we have a lot to chat about. One thing that I know is of interest to you and the Economic Development Commission, and it was certainly something that was discussed with the Yale Urban Design team, is the need for connecting downtown New London waterfront with Fort Trumbull. Where are we with that from your perspective and the agencies that you're representing?
Well, there's no doubt that it's a great challenge because the location of Fort Trumbull is on a peninsula, and it juts out in a way that brings it close to the center of the city. And if we could make a connection, it would generate a synergism between downtown and the fort, particularly after we get more development there. Recently, there's been talk about the fact that it would be easy to attach a walkway to the swing bridge, which is the railroad bridge that Amtrak operates. There are some issues with that. It would be difficult in terms of safety. Amtrak has a major concern about safety. And something that folks don't realize that in the summertime, which is when we would probably have the most foot traffic between downtown and Fort Trumbull, the swing bridge pretty much remains open to accommodate boaters. And that would not accommodate our foot traffic. So folks would walk to the crossing, find the bridge open and have to wait, and after that happens a few times, folks may not use the bridge. Of course, there is another way to develop a pedestrian bridge, but it's very expensive. So we're looking at all of the alternatives that might be available. Certainly if Amtrak all of a sudden decided they would cooperate with us and enable us to put a swing bridge in, pedestrian bridge attached to the swing bridge, we'd look at that very carefully. Other options are, years ago we talked about an aerial tramway. Again, expensive to develop and probably expensive to manage and operate and maintain. Recently, we've had launch service in the mooring area of downtown St. Thomas, New London, because we developed a new mooring field just last year. And it might be an idea to create a taxi service that would connect several points downtown, even as far away as State Pier, with the several locations at Fort Trumbull. It wouldn't just be at a drop-off point where we're also talking about creating a mooring field, but it could also be at Pier 7, which is right in front of Fort Trumbull. So the taxi service could be a viable way of at least testing the connection between downtown and Fort Trumbull. There are other ideas that are being floated. For example, it's conceivable that a rail service could be developed using the existing rail track between Union Station and a station that would be developed at Fort Trumbull. Picture one of the shuttles that operates, for example, at Atlanta Airport, which runs on its own, virtually. It's computer-driven. Such a shuttle could run back and forth between downtown and Fort Trumbull. So there are a lot of ways to implement this connection. We're currently working on foot traffic the long way, and it's difficult because there are several areas where we're obstructed, but if we could create a walking bike path that would connect downtown to Fort Trumbull, that would be a positive step.
I think that the connection from the waterfront to Park Promenade to Fort Trumbull is critical to be a catalyst for both downtown as well as the fort. And it ought to be given some priority consideration. And it's going to require cooperation between not only the New London leaders, but I think the state, our federal leaders, as well as Amtrak, which is a federal operation, to see the light of day. It just, I think that the critical mass of people, it's important. As a matter of fact, again, this is something I think that may have been one of the linchpins of the Yale Urban Design report by Dr. Alan Plattis, is this connection, so that the fort is not just an isolated island, so to speak.
Exactly. And I think that we will continue to explore it. I think it's the responsibility of our CDA, since we're responsible for developing the peninsula, to make sure that the conversation continues and that the appropriate people are made aware of what we need and what we're trying to do. Alan Plattis will be coming back to our area working on the new proposed Heritage Trail. and we hope to get him involved again, re-engage him with what we're doing at Fort Trumbull.
Good. We've got a call.
Good.
Good evening, and you're on the air.
Hey, Marty. Hey, Frank. This is Dennis from New London. I have a couple questions for you, Frank. First off, you just said that the bridge stays open a lot for the boaters. Now, are they staying open because it just stays that way because they know boaters are going to come and go, or is there a line of boats coming out at that time? The reason I'm asking is because if the bridge is closed and it only opens for when boats are coming and going, there's no reason that bridge should stay open. Because I think your cheapest way to connect the city to Fort Trumbull would be with some kind of attached walkway on that bridge.
Should I respond now? You said a couple of questions. All right. Well, I agree with you. Couple things to keep in mind. One, I don't know if now they leave the bridge open as a matter of convenience for boaters, and if in fact Amtrak agreed to attach a walkway to the bridge, that they would change the schedule. I mean, some folks have talked about doing what they do in Mystic, where the road bridge is only opened at certain times. And you could do the same, create some kind of schedule. Of course, trains come more frequently, so the bridge would definitely have to be closed for the train, so that's a positive, and the boaters may be advised that the swing bridge will only open for them 2 or 3 times an hour, and it would be on a scheduled basis, and that would accommodate the pedestrians that would be walking across the bridge. Again, Amtrak has to be approached. They have not been approached currently. I know they have a lot of concerns about liability and safety, and that's reasonable to assume. There's another issue to think about. When you picture the 2 closest points between the point near the end of the public walkway on the waterfront and the closest point on Fort Trumbull, once you land there, you're still a considerable distance from any activity at Fort Trumbull. For example, the fort itself is all the way at the other end of the peninsula. So someone walking across the bridge would have still a hefty walk between their starting point and their ultimate goal. So these are all things that need to be considered. One of the things we're going to do, Dennis, in the near future is our president, Linda Mariani, as new president of RCDA, wants to hold a public charrette, hopefully with Alan Plattis back in tow, to have another look at what we can be doing and get input from the community about what's the best way to proceed.
Okay, hang in there with me. 2 more questions.
Okay.
What's the status on the Stillmans?
Status on the Stillmans is that the development agreement is no longer in operation. They are hoping to receive special funding under a DECD proposal. There was a recent round of funding that they missed, but all of the funding wasn't granted, and there will be another round of funding in December. So conceivably, if they were fortunate in obtaining that funding, they're welcome to come back to RCDA with a fresh proposal.
Well, I don't really agree with that. But last but not least,
yes,
I know you and Tony from Harbor Towers
yes,
have talked in the past about a commitment plan for the part of the eminent domain section of Fort Trumbull. I don't know if you guys are still talking about that. You know what I'm talking about, Frank?
Well, what Tony proposed, in fact, I was going to talk later tonight, if we have time, about Tony's 8 steps to transform New London. And one of his proposals for Fort Trumbull was, it didn't specifically relate to the property that was taken by eminent domain, but it talked about the entire peninsula and the development that should take place there. And what Tony suggests, and I happen to agree with him, is
I agree with him too.
Yeah, you create a synergy by getting several developers of the needed developments to commit to work simultaneously and to doing everything at one time. And that is possible to achieve, and there is some there are financing resources that are available that we're looking at, and there are some major developers who are beginning to express interest. So the next step for us is to put a request for proposal out there and see who salutes.
I wish you luck with that. I really do.
Great, thank you, Dennis.
Sorry, Marty. I'll let you go now.
Dennis, thank you for the call, and I thought it was very good questions.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thanks a lot. Well, that was good to kick things off there with the phone. And before we continue, I just would be remiss if I didn't mention this week we have our youth working in the control room. The young folks from the Drop-In Learning Center, Azel Morales, who's now a grade 9 student at the Science and Tech Magnet School, and Dakia James, who's an 8th grade student at the Benny Dover Jackson Middle School, and they're representing the Drop-In Learning Center. And they're here every week, and I want to thank them for their work, and I hope they're getting something out of the experience. I'd like to just take a half a step back if we could. You know, in the intro we talked about St. Thomas, Philadelphia. Yeah, how did you land in New London? I mean, this is a little off the beaten path from a rather large urban area and tropical islands, southern area.
It's actually not as complicated as it sounds.
It may not be, but please share.
I'd be delighted to. My wife, Linda, is from Groton. So it's that simple. When I went to St. Thomas, I met Linda. Within a very short period of time, I knew she was the right one. I married her. We happened to stay in St. Thomas. As I said, I had a career in first in broadcasting and then in real estate. We had 4 children. They were all born and raised there. But when we got a little older, we used to come back here in the summertime to visit family. And all of our children who were educated on St. Thomas came back to the mainland for school, for college. And we thought it would be fun to have a home here. We actually intended to split our time between St. Thomas and, at the time, we bought a home in Mystic. But as it turned out, we found we couldn't have a foot in both places. It just didn't work. And so after we lost everything in Hurricane Hugo in 1989, we rebuilt, and in 1995 we got whacked again, and my wife said, you know, we have a house in Connecticut. I'm out of here. And so I liquidated everything in St. Thomas, and we moved full-time to Connecticut. We bought the house 28 years ago, and now 30 years ago, and we moved up here full-time about 15 years ago. And then 4 years ago, we moved to New London. The reason for that is we both were anxious to be in an urban environment. My wife's an artist, and she was doing most of her work in New London. I was doing my redevelopment work in New London. We happened to find a house. Our house in Mystic was built in 1838, and the house we ended up buying in New London was built in 1840. So basically, we just wanted a newer home. So we're very lucky we found a house on Star Street. That's where we live, and we absolutely love it.
That's terrific. And I didn't realize that you were looking for work as a humorist as well, maybe prime time here.
Yeah, you well know if you don't have a sense of humor, you're not going to get through this life.
That's terrific. So you've had, in essence, a dozen years then in New London.
That's correct.
And you're primarily into redeveloping and holding, or do you flip, or some combination thereof? You've got single-family homes, apartment buildings.
Yeah, it's a combination there. First of all, I backed into the business in that when I moved up here, I thought I was retired. Realized, number one, that I wanted to keep busy. Number two, I wasn't nearly as wealthy as I thought I was, and I needed to work. I bought a building that I redeveloped. I had another partner. We owned 3 buildings, one of which we had completely redeveloped. And then my partner decided it wasn't the business for him. Being a landlord is not an easy business. And so I bought him out, and then I was redeveloping another building by myself, and my son came along. He had been in the appraisal business in St. Thomas. He had sold that business. So he was looking for something to do, and I asked him to help me finish this building that I was working on. He did, and he's a far better mechanic than I am. I am not a construction kind of guy. I'm more on the business end of it, and my son is very good at the construction end. When we finished that building, he said, "What's next?" And I said, "Well, if you want to stick around and do this, we'll form a company and become partners." And that's what's evolved, and it's a very good partnership. He actually owns most of the company now. Because of my other activities, I've pulled back from the company, and he runs the day-to-day operation. And to answer your question about what we do, we primarily buy buildings that other people overlooked or they don't feel can be brought back to life. We bring them back to life. We love doing that. It's the greatest. It gives me a great kick to take something that nobody else likes and turn it into something everybody goes, "Wow, look at that. That looks nice." And most of them we keep. Some of them we do sell. It just depends on the marketing situation at the time. So,
Well, older communities need folks like you who are willing to do that type of work. I mean, otherwise you just get decay and neighborhoods run down. And you're able to do this at market.
yeah, we do. We don't do it without. We do it without subsidy. Everything we do is at market rate, and it's a challenge at times. There's no doubt about that. You know, we said we were going to talk about Tony Silvestri's 8 steps to transforming New London.
Yep.
And one of the things that he's been talking about now for probably 18 months is city flats, and it looks like it's really going to come to fruition. And again, you know, my business, I'm still a landlord, so I have tenants. Tony's project with City Flats is creating home ownership, and that's really what a community needs. Our community in New London is almost 60% tenant occupied, so only 35 to 40% is owner occupied, and that's not good. You need to have, I mean, in America, 70% of the homes are owned by people. In other words, the people own their own homes. So what Tony is proposing is to take, again, some of these properties that have seen better times and need to be redeveloped, redeveloping them into multi-family units, taking a 2 or 3 family building, redeveloping it into a 3 or a 4 family building, and condominiumizing it, and then actually selling these units to people that will be able to live there and pay less in ownership costs than it costs to pay rent. And he's got the numbers to prove it, and it's a very exciting concept for the City of New London.
And is there a target area that he's hoping to initiate this idea with?
Well, sure, and the target area is the backyard of New London Harbor Towers, which makes a lot of sense.
So you're looking at Reed Street and Brewer Street.
That's correct.
In that
Yep,
area.
that area.
Linman Street.
Yep, all of the. If you walk in those areas today, you'll see many homes that are in desperate need of redevelopment, and that's exactly what he's going to do. He already has a list of homes that he's ready to work on. He already has a list of folks who are ready to buy. So it's just now a matter of, I think he has to get some zoning adjustments, which he's working on. They're identifying through New London landmarks what each individual home, what it was, how it was, so that they can bring it back to be like it was. And these won't be classic restorations, but they will be redevelopment that will be, first of all, making the new home safe and sound, and bringing it up to code, and, by the way, making it attractive, and therefore improving the entire neighborhood.
Now, the people who currently are living in these areas, will they be affordable for them, or are we looking at gentrification and these folks are going to be getting kind of pushed out?
No, you're not really looking at gentrification, because according to the numbers that Tony has developed, the buyer of a home will be paying less in mortgage fees than they're paying now in rent. So conceivably, there's no reason why they couldn't become a homeowner and pay less than they're paying now as a tenant.
And have a fully rehabilitated home.
Yeah, have a modern home instead of a dump. So it's a great concept. And this isn't, Tony's not inventing the wheel here. This has been successful in Providence and in Boston. There's no reason why it can't be successful here. And you know, I've personally experienced the redevelopment of neighborhoods here in New London, again, through my work with RCDA and House New London and our nonprofit partners. A perfect example of this is Belden Street and Belden Court. Those nonprofit partners went into this neighborhood. It was a targeted neighborhood. They bought derelict homes, completely redeveloped them, and sold them on a subsidized basis to folks who now live there. And today, you can walk in Belden Street and Belden Court and feel comfortable and safe, and almost every home looks like new. And every person, none of those homes that have been purchased, none of the owners have defaulted. All of those homeowners are successful. And we're now going on to 5 or 6 years that this is, you know, it's actually been the last 12 years, but the recent home sales there with folks that never thought they would own a home, now own a home, and they're making it work. And that's extremely positive, not only for the individuals who now become homeowners, for the neighborhood and the other folks that live there, and for the city. The tax base is increased by virtue of the value of these homes. So it's a triple win.
I wholeheartely agree, and you're doing a lot of this, although via rentals, like I say, with market levels or market rates, as opposed to, I mean, work with like Habitat, and you've got Echo and Hope that are working in similar veins, and the restoration of these neighborhoods has been remarkable.
Yes, we did one on Belden Street, and we redeveloped it privately with no subsidies whatsoever, and we sold it, that particular home. And see, that's another great thing, that we sold it. It was a two-family, so the family that bought it lived in one section. They're collecting rent from the other section, and their cost of ownership is $200 or $300 a month because the tenant is helping to pay their mortgage. So everybody wins.
That's what we like.
Yeah.
Within the context of Tony's plan, just out of curiosity, how is the Columbus Square auto dealt with? Does that stay as is? They've got kind of an impound area there where cars are brought in that's got fenced and barbed wire. It's rather imposing looking. Is that kind of as is, or does he look to relocate that?
I honestly don't know. Anything I would say would be speculation. If I knew, I would say. I think Tony has talked to them about relocating, and they are not opposed to relocating. You know, where they are is a bit difficult for them to operate. I think they'd love to be in an area where they have more land. So if they could make some kind of move that did not cost them or affect their business, I think they'd be willing to do it. But you know, the interesting thing about New London Harbor Towers, first of all, I have to tell you, my son and I looked at that building before it was redeveloped. And at the time, they wanted more money than we felt we could pay to make it redevelop. And then we went on the second and third floors, and we looked out the windows, and we looked at oil tanks. You know, we didn't see any positive way to do it. The first thing Tony did was build a 3-story garage. And so the first residential unit is on the 4th story and has a view. So right there, I credit him with genius. Then the interesting thing is, when he was building it, I thought, well, I don't know, you know, it's great. He's going to have so many units with a water view, and they will probably sell. But what about the units that are looking back, as you say, on the Columbus Circle Yard and maybe some derelict houses?
I'll tell you, some of the views from up top looking back into New London are absolutely spectacular.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The first time I was able to go into the building and I got to the 5th floor and looked out, it was a city view. It was fantastic. And he's been selling the units back there, so it's not an issue. I think Tony's issue with City Flats is just making sure that the neighborhood surrounding New London Harbor Towers is a place where people want to be. And that's what is going to happen. All of the streets that you mentioned will become like Belden Street, and it'll be a home run.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I really applaud Harbor Towers for is that it's built urban, right on the sidewalk. Parking, self-contained. And so if you're walking on the sidewalk, and Bean and Leaf has done exceptionally well with their relocation there, and there's a reason to go there, as opposed to across the street where you've got the infamous Parcel J, which is a vast expanse of empty land. You know, why would you want to walk over there? There's nothing there. Or even into Shaw's Cove redevelopment project, which is all kind of a suburban a light industrial park. I mean, you almost need to want to go there, and it's designed to drive in and park. So it's not really pedestrian friendly. And I think that a critical consideration for downtown New London is to look carefully at what is working, I think, with Harbor Towers in terms of how it was constructed for future consideration in other developments.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. My friend George Waterman, who owns Harris Place, where I have an office for RCDA, we interact on occasion, and his comment to me on several occasions has been what New London needs is a half a dozen New London Harbor Towers. We need the vertical development because that brings more people in, and those people will be on the street and will support the retail that we so desperately try to develop. And without the people on the street to support it, it simply isn't going to happen. Yeah. So the more we can develop vertically and bring people to town, the better we'll be. And not only that, that again increases the tax base with a very small area. Yeah.
And I know folks, and I know as well as you, that have moved into Harbor Towers, as well as Shaw's Landing and other downtown apartments, because they want to be within walking distance of a lot of stuff, whether it's their entertainment, their coffee, dining, the train station.
Yeah, the new
that urban environment. It's kind of as Claire Gordiani called it once upon a time. A hip little city. Well, I mean, that's what it will create if things are operating in all cylinders.
Well, it's true, and interestingly enough, people are coming back to urban centers. All throughout the country, urban centers are being revitalized, especially if they're transit-oriented, which we are. And young people...
At the macro level. The micro level, yeah. There's a lot of room for improvement.
Oh, absolutely. There's always room for improvement. But, I'm reading that young people today, a lot of young people, aren't interested in owning cars. They're not interested in driving. They want good transportation. They want to be in an urban environment. And we know that one of our redevelopments at 13 Golden Street, we redeveloped a building there with New York-style Soho-type loft apartments. And the young people love them. That's exactly where they want to be. They don't want to drive. They want to be able to leave their apartment, go out. They don't cook, unless that's their specialty. They want to go to a restaurant, maybe have a couple of drinks, not worry about driving, so they can walk to and fro. And that's exactly what they want. New London, with the hip little city with its music scene, appeals to young people. So there's no doubt that if we build it, they'll come. It's just a matter of getting that many more spaces developed, as I say, going up instead of out.
Very good. Folks, you're watching City Focus. I'm Marty Olson, your host, and I'm joined tonight by Frank McLaughlin, and we're live. So if you'd like to give us a call and contribute to the program, we'd love it. So please do. The numbers are on the screen. Locally, you can reach us at 860-440-3154, or if you're out of the local calling area, we're at 800-253-2285. In your dozen years in New London, what have you seen change? For the good, maybe for the not so good? I mean, what's working? I mean, you've stayed here. You haven't liquidated and moved to Nebraska. I mean, you've...
Is that my choice?
Well,
I'll stay. No, absolutely there's been improvement. There's no doubt about that. Redevelopment, everywhere you look. It's interesting. Now, when we redeveloped 2 Union which was a group of 4 derelict buildings. There had been a murder there, there had been a fire, and somebody died in a fire. I mean, they were just derelict buildings. And we redeveloped those, and it's one of our more successful redevelopments, and one we don't plan to sell. And one, I was showing an apartment to a young naval officer, and he didn't know where to meet me when I told him where we were going. So I met him on the edge of the city, and he followed me, and I went in the back way. So after I showed him the apartment, he liked it, but he still didn't know where he was. And he didn't have a sense that he was downtown. I said, well, let's take a walk, and we'll walk downtown. I'll show you exactly where you are. And of course, it was a short walk down Pearl Street. And the interesting thing is, as I walked with this young man, everything I pointed to was a recent redevelopment within the last then 5 years, and now 10 years. So everywhere you look, there's been improvement, and that's positive. We're under a new form of government. I think it's a challenge for everybody, but I believe it's making progress. There's no doubt that Mayor Finizio, being able to pull everyone together to bring the Coast Guard Museum to New London is, as my friend again, Tony Silvestri, I said, that's the silver bullet everybody talks about. Tony said, that's a silver bazooka. And it truly is, because I think that will help to build the foot traffic. Even the most modest numbers that they talk about for visitors to the city of New London will be extremely positive. The fact that it will be the center. The Coast Guard Museum is very unique because the Coast Guard is the only national service that doesn't have a museum. So it's going to be, everybody says, how are you going to raise all that money? I don't believe it's going to be that difficult to raise the money because people will and not only that, the Coast Guard has touched everybody. Anybody that's been a boater has had an experience with the United States Coast Guard. And that's not a negative experience. That doesn't have to do with war. It has to do with support and help. And I think that the Coast Guard has got a phenomenal reputation that way nationally, and that's where the money's going to come from. Sure, locally we're going to be asked to contribute, and we will contribute, and some of us have contributed. But nationally, people are going to say, yes, we want to see a National Coast Guard Museum. And oh, by the way, it's in New London, Connecticut. That's okay. We can get there by train. We can drive there. We can even fly there. So, there was some concern before when folks said, well, it was supposed to go to Fort Trumbull. What are you going to do at Fort Trumbull? Well, we might develop another museum at Fort Trumbull. We may become the museum mecca of southeastern Connecticut. We've already got several great museums here, whether you talk about the aquarium or the seaport, which is a phenomenal asset, Mystic Seaport, or you talk about Lyman Allen Museum and some of the other museums that we have here. So I just see it as being a catalyst that will just put us over the top.
Yeah. Well, the key word you used is catalyst. I think that there's been a mindset in New London, and I'm a lifer here, where, and you also mentioned Silver Bullet.
Yes.
In Silver Bullet Solutions, I think that we have had a propensity in New London to view some of these larger projects as Silver Bullet Solutions rather than as a catalyst. And that's a key difference in terms of achieving success. We can't expect a standalone anything to cure all of our problems.
Absolutely. It's got to be a combination of things.
Whether it's the museum, Coast Guard Museum, Pfizer/electric boat, Captain's Walk, opening Captain's Walk, or whatever other projects that we've done of that ilk, singularly have not achieved the stated goals. But if we work as a community, I think that we can make all of this stuff work in a very positive vein. I mean, we've got a number of small historical sites that in and of themselves, I wouldn't necessarily call them destination spots, but collectively, and they're close enough to walk, that we ought to be trying to market all of them together. Boston has their Freedom Trail. I mean, we have our historic trail.
Right.
Whether it's from the cemetery, the Old Town Mill, Custom House, Nathan Hale's Schoolhouse, the Courthouse, Hempstead House, they're all within a short walk.
Well, you remember a couple of years ago when we were fortunate enough to have several cruise ships come to the city of New London, And New London Main Street, at the time I was president of the organization, although I can't take credit for it, Penny Parsekian organized the tour guides that we put, because the buses had to bring the people from State Pier downtown. And we saw that as an opportunity to introduce the cruise ship passengers to New London. And you had a 7 to 10 minute bus ride, and on that bus ride we touted the features and benefits